I seem to find myself in this place where I continue to hit the record button. We continue to move forward. Hello, my name is Patrick Cadigan. I am a public school special education teacher, and I actually have a co-host, and who would that be?
And I am Megan Smallwood, and I am a public school transition coordinator.
And we are here for post-secondary transition, or P2 transition, to talk about the transition process for parents who are going through it. Where do we start? This is going to be another one. For our last few episodes, we talked about how we got some user feedback, and we're doing 101 style conversations, which it works to essentially introduce parents to the world of secondary transition, or more specifically, post-secondary transition. Mm-hmm. And we're continuing our way up the ladder. So we started with an overview of what post-secondary transition is, covered what a transition coordinator does or should do, and then moved to timelines. So for this week, we're going to discuss where the parents can start for each year once their child hits, once they have that transition piece on their IEP, right? So I'm getting a little ahead of myself before we even do that. We typically have a definition for what post-secondary transition is. Megan, what is that definition?
Good question. So post-secondary transition really just focuses between the ages of 14 through 21 and helps answer that question of what do you want for your child after they leave school? We're looking to help answer that question by asking you parents to think long-term, the milestones ahead of you, the research, the resources, the goals that you have.
And how do we define long-term? Well, what do you want for your child to be doing after the school bus stop's coming, right? Which is going to be different for everybody. It really seems, in the conversations that we've had up until this point, it's a completely individualized experience. Along with that, individuality can come some loneliness, in some cases a sense of isolation, but there are other families who are going through this, and probably at the same time you are.
Right. And along that journey, there's milestones that you really need to focus on. Some of them are built around time frames, but others can be at your own time frame whenever you're comfortable and ready for them. So using your child's school experiences will really help while you're doing the research. Using all the resources at your disposal, such as your school transition coordinator and other teachers, is also very imperative. It might be a lot of information, and there's definitely a lot to consider. And unfortunately, in many cases, the answer won't always immediately present itself. There might be some give and take. There will always be things that you do that you might not have that desired outcome for. Trying to do all of it at once can really feel consuming. So we're hoping to help clear away some of that fog.
Yeah. So along with clearing away some of that fog, let's jump into it. So, all right, Megan, you have a student who's on an IEP. They have just turned 14. We're going to assume that they're in middle school, right? That's kind of my domain. I have done that, what we have talked about before. I've done an interest preference or a transition interview, and I've cataloged what the student is interested in doing. That can change, and that's totally fine, which is to say that it can change down the line. Totally fine. But now they transitioned, they're in high school. For a high school freshman, what should the parents be concentrating on? Where do they start?
Well, and to go back to what you were saying, that information that's gathered usually during 8th grade when they just turn 14 and they're getting ready to transition is really useful for us high school staff to get to know the student and what their career goals may be and just what their interests and strengths might be. I usually use that as a talking point when I have that first transition interview with the student before their annual IEP meeting. And it just helps me to kind of ask them, okay, is this still an area of interest? And a lot of times they'll say, no, I don't really like that anymore. I want to do this. And, we don't expect them to know what they're going to do 10 years down the road, but at least it gives them some structure to help figure out what classes they may want during their journey through the school system. But I get ahead of myself. Freshman year, like I said, that annual IEP meeting comes up. we want them participating in the IEP meeting. They are an important part of that meeting. The meeting's about them. They need to be invited. They should be attending. They should be hearing the feedback from their teachers, their parents, and have input into what accommodations are really helping them. It's just so important for them to understand it, because when they leave us in 4 years or 5 years, whenever they're ready, they need to understand how the process and why they had the IEP, what they got from the IEP. And I just talked to a bunch of students with IEPs in tutorial this past week and explained to them, you need to be aware of it in order to advocate for yourself. And that's something they can practice all the time in school. So I'll get off my soapbox now, but please advocate for your student to participate in their IEP meeting.
Well, now here's a question, because of course we've had many conversations with all different kinds of parents who have had different kinds of experiences. What about the parents who have students who don't, who are nonverbal or who do not communicate in the traditional sense? What would you?
Great question. Yeah. I mean, and it's equally as important for them to attend. And I've had students who have come, and it's just so refreshing to see that they are included. And maybe they don't communicate the way, everyone else does, but to have them there to hear the great things that are being said about them and the areas that they're going to continue to work on with this next IEP, that's just important for them to hear. Also, what I've done with students in the past is met with them prior to the meeting. We gave them choices, had them pick or, write out what they wanted to share at the meeting, and had a little script so that before we really got into the nitty gritty at the meeting, we let the student have a moment to share their input and let their voice be heard. So it doesn't have to look that, black and white, come and verbalize, just like everyone else. Just like an IEP, it's very individualized.
So then starting off the freshman year, key point is for participating in an IEP. What would you say comes next?
Definitely consider applying to DORS, the Division of Rehabilitative Services, or, if applicable, DDA, the Developmental Disabilities Administration. We definitely encourage that at age 14. Not that DDA can do a lot at 14, but like we will talk about in other conversations to come, it's definitely good to get your student's name in there and be part of their database. DORS is something they can access at 14, and your transition coordinator can definitely shine more light on it for you, but it would give your child the experience with some work experiences, some self-advocacy. DORS can offer a whole bunch of things, and it's good. It's a resource at your expense or at your fingertips, and anyone with a documented disability can participate.
Needless to say, that is one of those upcoming conversations that we plan on having. And one of the cool parts of that, just to give a hint at what we're thinking, is we have, we have two sets of people. Look, first we're going to have the conversation about DDA, but then we're going to have two sets of people come in, each individual interviews, right? And then we're going to,
right.
Yeah, so that should be good stuff. All right, so we've got participate in an IEP, apply to DORS or DDA. What do you think? What should come next?
I think that the home file would be a good thing to start considering, because you're going to start getting those transition pages for your student, and you need a place to keep it all together. I know you get a lot of papers from school, but starting a transition specific binder or folder would be very helpful, especially if you do a referral for DORS or an application for DDA. You want to keep that all in one place. Unfortunately, sometimes these agencies can lose paperwork or misplace things. So you want to have that copy on hand.
No,
it's hard. I know.
You
hard
totally
to believe.
Lying. Okay.
I know. It is good to have it on hand. And I also like to write on there when it was sent to them and what was sent with it. For example, for DDA, I electronically send it, and we will get into this in further conversations, but I always keep the date when I electronically send it, because I have gone forward to the specialist before and said, oh, so-and-so's application was sent on this day electronically, and they've magically found it. So just keep a nice file for your own records.
Is there anything else that they should think of in terms of what should go in the home file, like a staple?
Staple it together.
Yeah, staple everything. But I mean, like, there are at least 3 things, or there are at least 5 things that you should find in that home folder when they open it up.
I think as they get older, there will definitely be more. But if your student, let's say, is on the diploma track, or even if not, I mean, any student can participate in them. But if you're considering like a career academy for the from the school system, or if you're considering information about the work programs we have, it's just good to keep that all together, so you can go back and review. As they get older and they hit other milestones, there will definitely be more to add to that file, though.
Got it. All right, so we're going to say that that's the end of freshman year. Now they're going to move on and they're going to go and become a sophomore. What should be the first thing that families think about when around that sophomore timeframe?
Kind of like I just touched on, the school-based programs will definitely be helpful to start just recognizing and becoming more familiar with, because we usually look at the ones for the certificate track around age 16, junior year. So your IEP team might have a conversation during sophomore year about it. We definitely are open to talking about, any questions you might have about it, but it's a great experience for your student to get ready for the real world.
All right. Now you're going to have to help me out here. When we talk about school-based programs, like, could you give an example, or like, what does that mean? What does that mean for somebody who doesn't know?
So within our school system, we have the Career and Community Exploration, or CCE program, which is kind of like in past times Enclave, where they have a group of students that go out to different work sites for volunteer opportunities. There's usually a teacher and a para, and maybe 4 to 5 students. And it gives the students an opportunity to switch staff. So they're not just with their school-based staff. They get to practice working with other staff. They get to be around other peers from other schools. And they also get to be in their community. And it's really a great opportunity to see what skills they have, what strengths they have, where they really like to work. I mean, we've seen some of our students really just shine at these work sites, which could potentially lead to other opportunities, like our work study program, which is more independent work. They're not with the group, they're by themselves, and they have the transition specialist who comes in and initially job coaches and then fades away. And then that could potentially lead to other more independent work opportunities within the school system, which we have community connections based off of the HCC campus, or Project Search, which is for those students in their last year before exit. So lots of opportunities. Your IEP team can definitely talk to you more in conversation about it, and your transition specialist will have all the information, especially if there are upcoming workshops about each one.
And I will throw out there, and I know that this is pretty local, which is to say local for us, but in the show notes, I'm going to include a link to the Project Search page that we have created. It just gives an overview of what it is, but it is something that it could be something to consider. Cool. All right. So exploring school-based programs.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What comes next?
Definitely attend that transition fair. We usually have one every year. And there is just so many resources available at one time, which can be overwhelming, which is also why we encourage you to go every year. I know this past transition fair we just had, I was telling a parent, who looked very overwhelmed by what she was getting, to just take it all home and just maybe one time a week, just take out one page to look at and then put it back away.
You know what? Then that's going to actually then lead me in. Let's assume that no one knows what we're talking about. If you were to give a definition of a transition fair, what would it be? What is a transition fair, and what is its purpose?
I think a transition fair is an opportunity for us to bring together a whole bunch of different agencies, providers, resources in one space, all around post-secondary transition. They each might play a different role in it, but they're all together in that same spot so that you can gather all that information at one time. And it also gives you, the parent, a chance to talk to these people one-on-one and ask more specific questions other than what you're just seeing on their flyer. I know at the last one we also had breakout sessions, which gave the opportunity for the parents to actually hear some more informational sessions on different topics such as DDA or Social Security. So it definitely varies year to year, but it's an opportunity to gather as many resources at one time as you can.
I will warn the parents, though, because it was one of those things, the first one that I went to, which is probably the same one that you're talking about. Get ready for acronym vomit. But oh boy.
Very true. Very true. Bring your acronym list from our website with you. It will come in handy.
And guess what? There will be a link in the show notes to that one too. Because yep, you are going to need it. All right, cool. So we have transition fair. Is there anything else that they should think about for that sophomore timeframe?
Usually, and depending on the age of your student, conversation starts about thinking for that milestone of 18 years old and preparing for it. Whether, depending on the path you go, you may want to consider an attorney who specializes with guardianship for individuals with disability or special needs trusts. Just get that conversation going. You also want to consider applying for that state-issued ID, which usually around 18 will encourage parents to make sure their student or young adult has one on hand. And then also creating that ABLE account, because that's another thing that once they hit 18, it becomes very instrumental when money is kind of under the microscope with Social Security.
Now, really quickly, because I had in the back of my head, I
unloaded a lot there. I know. I'm sorry.
No, and that's cool. But I just want to make sure. So I am going to assume that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that the state issued ID, like that's virtually the same thing as a driver's license, except it's not actually about driving, but it's gonna say who the person is, where they live, like that kind of like identifiable information. Got it.
It's a non-driver's ID. Okay. It looks exactly like a driver's license base, but it has the student's information.
Got it. All right. Then now, ABLE account. Now, this is something that I've heard that we've kind of touched on in the past. So yeah, can you, what is an ABLE account?
So an ABLE account comes from the ABLE Act, which is 529A, and it's related to that college savings 529. It is not part of SSI or Medicaid at all. So you do not need to have SSI to open the account. But it is very beneficial if you do have SSI, let's say, for example, because with SSI, you cannot have more than $2,000 in the bank account with your young adult's name, any bank account. So let's say, grandpa unfortunately passed away and left a lot of money in the name of your young adult. You need somewhere to put that because you would get denied for SSI because they can't have that money. So an ABLE account is not taxable. It's easy to use and get. It was just signed into law in 2016, actually. It only takes $25 to open the account, and you can have up to $100,000 in there without jeopardizing your SSI.
And an ABLE account, now that's specifically, though, for people with disabilities, correct? Like that's not something, like I couldn't walk in and open up an account like that. I have 2 children, but that doesn't apply.
Right. And to open it, you would need to be power of attorney or guardianship of property for the person that has the disability in order to be able to help manage it.
All right. So we've done freshman year. We've talked a little bit about the sophomore year. So we get to the end of that. Now they're going to move on and they're going to go into their junior year. Where should parents start? Where should they start thinking about for that third year?
So typically around that third year, it varies again by age, depending on how old your student is, but we're starting to approach 18. You will want to consider reaching back out to DDA because most of the time, and we'll have future conversations about it, your young adult might be listed as future needs with DDA. I know a lot of parents have been telling me lately, well, I got the letter from DDA. It says there's no funding for them right now. They're just on some waiting list. I said, but that's okay because they're not 21 yet. You're going to be put on the waiting list. It just matters if it says it's future needs. That means they recognize, oh, yeah, they're going to need all the funding, but they don't need it yet. Usually by 17, 18, they want to start bringing in a coordinator for you so that they have that connection or that middleman to DDA, because they recognize that the transition will be happening within the next 3 years. So it would be good to either reach out to DDA or ask your transition specialist to help with that connection, just to see if you can bump up that status to current request. Then you would be assigned a coordinator. Well, technically you get to pick a coordinator, pick the agency for the coordinator, and then you're assigned a coordinator. And then that person would be your contact for DDA moving forward.
Got it. Is there anything else that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, if we're getting to 18, then you definitely want to consider if you are going to take or get guardianship or pursue one of the alternatives to guardianship. And that does not have to happen the minute they turn 18. I know a lot of parents, talking to other parents, they get very nervous. They're told by maybe doctors, oh, your child's turning 18 soon. You really need to consider this. You do not need to worry. It can happen at any point after. You'll be okay.
And I see that had come up, guardianship, and then you had mentioned alternative guardianships when we were doing at least one of the interviews. And I think that was the Nerschels, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, because
I believe so.
They were kind of like talking like right in the middle of that. So, all right. So we've got freshman, we've got sophomore. That was junior year. So again, we're kind of transitioning into. Now we've got senior year, and this is probably a big one, right?
Yeah, I will say this is probably the one where most parents get very nervous. The end is near. Well, so let me also say that senior year can be super senior year. If we're staying till 21, it's not going to look like it's just 4 years. It could be, 6 years. So senior year could be a repeat for a couple. Or if you are diploma bound and you need that 5 years, it could be that, super senior year. It's different for everybody. But ultimately, 18 is that magic number, that magic milestone where a lot of things do happen. And that's also when you want to consider applying for SSI or supplemental security. We always kind of trip up on this one. It doesn't roll off the tongue. Come on, guys. Oh my gosh, I know.
All right.
Yes. Yes, supplemental security income, SSI. After 18, again, do not have to call them on their 18th birthday. It is better not to call them on the 18th birthday because messes with their database, sets the clock going, whatever it is. Wait a month after and then start that process. But once you are found eligible, or your young adult is found eligible for SSI, that's an automatic eligibility for medical assistance. So then you knock that out as well, which ultimately you will need for DDA's purposes if your young adult is eligible for that.
So, we've heard a lot about SSI. In fact, now that I think about it, I'll leave a link in the show notes to the page that we created for that. And that was actually specifically after talking with one of our families about that.
And I'm sure we'll have future conversations about that too, because that's a loaded one.
I have absolutely no doubt. So then what is another thing to consider in that time frame?
Definitely that communication with your coordinator of community services or CCS. Unfortunately, there's always a big turnover. So you may have another one or a new one. So you just want to stay on top of that. Make sure you know who the current one is and that they are communicating with you.
And is this going to be a time where families are going to start to visit the agencies, the adult agencies that we've talked so often about?
Yes, this would be the perfect time to go explore. And the coordinator will definitely promote that and ask if you have visited or you want the contact information. But your transition specialist will be instrumental in making sure that you are able to reach out or take a tour or get connected, and that you are aware of what is available in the surrounding area for your young adult, and what might be appropriate, knowing your student.
And then how about school records? What, as they're preparing for that transition, 18 and on, what, and again, this is going to kind of go back to that home file, but what should parents, what are those, how do I want to say this? What are those core documents that they're going to want to have with them?
Yeah, and I guess I should have mentioned too, when you started that school file, definitely keep tabs on the latest assessments that were completed for your young adult, whether that be a psychological or cognitive from the psychologist, educational assessments, speech assessments, whatever it may be. And just keep in mind, because every 3 years for the IEP process, you have a reevaluation meeting. And best practice is not to go more than 6 years without updating those assessments. DDA will want assessments within the last 3 years that have been completed. So it's always important to keep in mind where your reevaluation year may line up with that, so that the team could consider doing updated assessments for you, because those you'll want in your transition file. And that will be very important to gather as school records.
Yeah, and it's weird because I feel like this is one of those that because so much of it kind of ties into the timeline conversation that we had from last week or 2 weeks ago. So I think that's a good place to stop. The next time that we meet, we're going to talk about DDA. So follow the information from this and our other shows in our show notes, and I'll include links in there. Follow, share the podcast, please. Check out our website. It is chock full of information around transition. That is www.postsecondarytransition.com. You can also now check out our YouTube channel. Now, I preface the YouTube channel announcement by saying that we do not have original content yet. However, what we do have is curated videos around, at this point we have guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, ABLE accounts, and a few other things. And so it's one of those where we're paying attention to what we think is going to be important for those families. And instead of, going to like all these different places on YouTube or typing in, you just go to, click on our link and it'll have those curated videos for you. And then lastly, if you have questions, do not hesitate to reach out. You can find our contact information on our website along with all the other information. So please do not hesitate to reach out. We love feedback. We've gotten some, we've used it. It's been really good. All right, Miss Megan, I think that I get to hit the stop recording button.
All right.
All right. Well, good deal. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you back for our next conversation.
Sounds good.